Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name's Matt.
My name's Dyl. We're both back here in person for what seems the first time in forever because I've had two festivals to attend. Matt has been running a festival, so we've seen a lot of stuff since the last time we've done one of these predictions videos.
Well, then let's get into it. We're going to talk Best Picture today, and instead of doing our usual thing where we just pick a few movies to talk about, we're going to do our best to get through everything. And of course, now you've seen Anora. The first thing that you told me when you saw Anora was, that's our Best Picture frontrunner. That's the movie that's supposed to sweep. But look, I mean, we both have it at number one, and you've seen it twice now.
I have seen it twice now, and at least the first time I saw it, I think the expectations were just so high. They were through the roof. I mean, it won the Palme d'Or. It's been the most buzzy film of all of 2024. At least for me, that first time, I was expecting something else than what I got. I still liked what I got. It just didn't reach everything I was hoping and I was wanting for. So then having my expectations tempered a little bit, knowing what to expect before going in. And I will say, my rewatch could have been affected because Mikey Madsen was in attendance. She gave a Q&A. Maybe it gave me more insight to the film, but I appreciated it. I liked it a little bit more the second time. I felt like the opening act felt more streamlined and felt more hyper energetic, while on the first viewing it felt a little sluggish to me. And I've seen it with three people ranging from a lot of ages, from my girlfriend to my grandma, and everyone I've seen it with has loved it, has adored it, has said it's one of their favorite films of the year. So at least to me, that shows it's going to play well to a voting body at large, even if my screens in both Philadelphia and in Virginia had a fair share of old heads walking out. It has the acclaim, it has the momentum, and now it's just a question, can this really be the frontrunner from day one all the way to the Oscars? There was a time where people were saying, oh, Sing Sing's the frontrunner, oh, The Brutalist is the frontrunner, but in reality, it probably was just Anora all along.
I wouldn't say Anora all along. I think everyone's really coalesced behind it since it has the Palme, as well as the People's Choice Award, as well as having such a strong Metacritic score, being widely liked, very populist, something that really most people can get behind. I will also tackle the thing that you're saying about older people in your audience walking out. We've seen that before with Everything Ever All at Once, where that was a movie that did not directly appeal to those voters. Really, what this is going to come down to is, do people get sick of Anora? Do they start looking for a replacement? And if so, what is that replacement? There's a few other options, but nothing feels as widely liked. All of them have really significant drawbacks to them. The same way that last year we had Oppenheimer way out front the entire season. Did people get tired of it? No, but also there was nothing else coming in as a viable alternative. That's what I'm feeling is missing from this race right now. What is the alternative? I want to talk packages for Anora because despite being a Best Picture frontrunner, it has a pretty small package going for it. The best package that I can see for Anora is, of course, picture, director, original screenplay, actress, editing, and if you want to get really, really wild with it, supporting actor for Yuri Borisov, and cinematography. And the worst package isn't too far off of that. You just cut supporting actor, you cut cinematography, then you've got your 5 nominations. I cannot see Anora going below those 5 nominations, and I can't see it going over those 7 nominations either.
I could see a world where it adds on an 8th. We've talked all season long about how just desolate supporting actor is. If Anora is truly this sweeper film, it's the strongest film of the bunch, I could see both of them come along, Yuri Borisov and Mark Edelstein, but at least at this moment, it's kind of crazy to really propose that because we still have films like A Real Pain that are strong, at least at this moment, and we expect someone like Edward Norton, A Complete Unknown, or Denzel Washington and Gladiator II to kind of stay in the conversation. But if those films kind of teeter off and Anora is this Oppenheimer, the Everything Ever All at Once type contender, I could see both of them coming in, and it's the real sign to show like, hey, Anora, it is the film of the season. It's the film people want to award, and they're going to give it those extra nominations because we've seen, with the exception of Coda, these Best Picture winners at least add in one extra nomination that you aren't really expecting going in. That could just be one supporting actor, or it could be cinematography like you're saying, but I feel like a lot of us in the community are expecting at least one of those to come with it. So if it adds something else, maybe that's an additional sign. But I agree, this film has a great floor and it has not an amazing ceiling, but the amazing ceiling is if it gets those 7 nominations, it could win 4 of them.
Well, that's the thing, is that it has such a strong strong win potential, even if it doesn't have a lot of places it could be nominated in. Also, I gotta take my wins when I have them, because this season has been full of huge L's for me. I have just been taking loss after loss after loss. So when something happens, like me being the first person on Awards Expert to have Yuri Borisov for a nomination, which you called me out for when we did our supporting nominations.
I did.
Months and months ago. You were like, there's no chance. So I feel very proud.
The next film, while we say Anora could potentially have some divisiveness around it, it's most likely loved. This next film, no, it's either you love it or you hate it.
But if you hate it, you're going to talk to everyone about how much you hate it. The thing about Emilia Pérez, the people who hate it are just as obnoxious about it as the people that love it. Maybe even more so. We have so many people just like decrying this film's existence, talking about how like this movie should not exist. There is a very valid argument that this film is probably going to hurt the people that it's trying to support. That's a pretty bad part of Emilia Pérez. However, you know what it reminds me of? In 2018, there was a little film called Green Book where all of the progressives out there were saying, this movie's not progressive, actually. A movie where you have a black man being driven around and making jokes about fried chicken, that's probably not a movie that is about the times that we're in and is not a real anti-racist message. And the Academy basically put their fingers in their ears and went, la 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 la, not listening. We like this movie and we're doing the right thing. The Academy that voted for Green Book truly believed that what they were doing was progressive. They truly wanted to award something that they thought they were making a statement with. And Emilia Pérez, unfortunately, could be a statement movie. It could be a movie that even voters who don't like it go, oh, this is the movie of the moment. It's important that we award this right now. I don't want to talk too much about the election. We're an Oscar channel. This is not what we're meant to do. But ultimately, we could see there be a bit of a protest vote where people say it would be meaningful if we stood up for trans rights right now. Trans people will tell you themselves, this is not the movie to do that with. Unfortunately, the Academy will not listen to that and will say, we're going to support you no matter what, whether you like it or not.
And I think it all goes back to what you said at the very top of this Emilia Pérez segment of comparing it to Green Book. Both of these films, I think, went in with positive intentions. When people watch it, if they're not as informed as some other people, they are going to think it's positive. They're going to think it's progressive. They're going to think it works. And even some people who do acknowledge the issues in the film still says the film overall works for them for various reasons. Talk about its potential package. This is a technical landslide as well as having the potential to rack up a lot above the line, because you could look at its best day. You could see picture, director, actress, 2 supporting actresses, international, cinematography, editing, adapted, score, song times 2, sound, costumes, production design, makeup. That's so many nominations, and obviously
16 nominations.
Yeah. Obviously, Emilia Pérez is not racking up 16 nominations.
It will miss some of those. When
you really think about it, if this film remains as strong as it has seemed so far, because I think this is the prime example. I know we talked about this a few months ago, like what will be the film Twitter villain of the year? We couldn't really pinpoint at that point because Emilia Pérez was not that strong of a contender at that point of the season. Clearly, Emilia Pérez is the villain of the season, but we see this every year. The villain of the season on film Twitter is not the villain of the season for the industry. And at least so far, Emilia Pérez is being embraced so much by the industry. It won 2 prizes at Cannes. It placed number 2 at TIFF, and it has been one of the buzziest, most seen films at every festival stop it's made along the way. So like realistically, if you want to be pessimistic about Emilia Pérez, I feel like at its worst day, it's picture, it's Carla Sofia Gascon and lead. I think both supporting actresses, Zoe Saldana and Selena Gomez, are pretty much in there at this point.
I wouldn't go that far, because if we're entertaining Grande in the conversation, we might not have room for 2 pop stars.
You could say that, but I think on the other end of the spectrum, this category is weaker for top-of-the-line competition, paired with the fact that Emilia Pérez is looking like a very strong film inside the awards season. And at least at this point, which may be a little blasphemous to say, especially for me as someone who's been hyped up the Sing Sing train all year, I think Emilia Pérez is the frontrunner for SAG Ensemble at this point. Going back to its worst package, it's those I mentioned before, International, which seems like a lock for a win. Obviously, that could change by this moment. And then, song, potentially at least one, most likely two, and then sound. I think for me, that's the minimum 7.
After the European Film Award nominations and how well Emilia Pérez performed there, I feel like director's a given.
I lean that way as well. I think director is in it for the moment. I think he very much fits the slot of the international director that we've been getting for the last few years. And it's not even because he is an international person. It's just the sensibilities of how he directed this film, of how he tackled this medium of a musical, appeals to that demographic of voter. And I feel like he could be someone who doesn't hit everywhere on the precursor circuit. I could see him miss DGA. I could see him potentially miss CCA, but I think he's in at BAFTA. I think he's in at Golden Globe. And then I think most likely, unless Emilia Pérez falls off a cliff, he's in at the Oscar.
It's going to be very easy in the next few months to really discount Emilia Pérez because we know in our bubble, Letterboxd, adjacent, film Twitter, there's going to be a lot of negativity about Emilia Pérez. And it's going to be very easy for people to write off the film and say, no one's going to vote for that. Everyone hates it. But that is not going to be the reality within the industry. So I want to ask you, not thinking too much about the preferential ballot, what do you think this film's winning package would be if it were to win Best Picture? Because I see a very strong possibility of it winning Best Picture.
Currently at this moment, I don't have the film winning Best Picture, but I do have it winning 3 Oscars. That being for Zoe Saldana, who after seeing the film, she doesn't feel like a sweeper type win. No. But I said the same thing about Divine Joy Randolph last year, and look how she went on to sweep. When there's no other competition in a film as strong as you are, you're going to end up winning those awards. And especially here, she does everything you need to win. She sings, she dances, she has dramatic moments, she has funny moments. And like I said, Emilia Pérez just seems strong. So on top of that, international feature. And I think song seems very likely. It's an original musical that's in Best Picture. Those tend to at least have a song. And I feel like this song has the top 2, at least at this moment. But if we're looking at this to win Best Picture, SAG would come along. I know that's not an Oscar prize, but that is an industry prize. I think that it would upset Anora at the Golden Globe comedy musical category. The international voting body there shows up, kind of similar to last year where they went with Poor Things over Barbie, maybe even BAFTA. But in terms of actual Oscar nominations, I don't know what else it could really win, but I think it would get a lot of support at the precursors to help boost it more so than actual Academy Award wins.
But typically, if we see a Best Picture winner, it needs screenplay or director. So I would say if Emilia Pérez is winning, then it would need to win director. And I think Carla Sofia Gascon would come along in actress, because I think then we'd be seeing that there is momentum around people supporting a trans performer, which I think would be really cool. Unfortunately, it would be at the loss of Mikey Madison, who I think truly deserves the award. She's phenomenal. But I do think that there is a significant chance that if Emilia Pérez wins, Carla Sofia Gascon comes along. And I think editing would be a win that would come along with Emilia Pérez if it were to win Best Picture too.
I could definitely see that angle, especially if Emilia Pérez gathers the acclaim from those other bodies. Just at least it's hard for me to see both Gascon and editing, or even either one at this moment. But I do agree that if this film is the eventual Best Picture frontrunner, one of those could be tacked on to its overall package.
People are probably already rage quitting the video listening to us talk about how Emilia Pérez genuinely could win Best Picture. That's something that I feel like people are not going to be happy with us for.
Let's dive into our next film, Dune Part 2. You know why I have this film so high in my Best Picture ranking? Because Denis Villeneuve, he's going to win this time. Warner Brothers and the industry are already out there supporting him. They've been screening this film with Denis in attendance so much more than they were doing in 2021. They're getting the big dogs to come out and support him as well. Martin Scorsese, James Cameron, Christopher Nolan. They're doing Q&As with Denis. They're making sure that at least his peers are showing, hey, we accept a blockbuster film and director. We accept this grand style filmmaking. And then with the death of the beloved Joker Falia Dub, Warner Brothers has nothing else to care about this year. They can give everything, all their power to Dune Part 2. When your main Best Picture contenders, stuff like Anora, stuff like Emilia Pérez, and stuff in the past like Sing Sing and maybe even potentially Conclave that aren't very director-heavy films, when you have a grand director-heavy film like this, if it can get that nomination, which I know is the giant hurdle to overcome, I think that Villeneuve could be looking at kind of two paths this year. He's looking at the Ben Affleck path. He's looking at the sweeper Christopher Nolan type path.
Gotta disagree with you on that. As much as I think Dune Part 2 is a really strong contender, it's the steady constant. As other movies are dropping off, this remains strong. People like this movie. As, you know, people are not loving films that are coming out as much as people expected to, this could just inch its way up the preferential ballot as we go through the season. But that said, this is not the type of movie that wins director anymore. The last time a big tech-heavy movie won Best Director...
last year.
I don't consider Oppenheimer to be Dune Part 2, though. Oppenheimer is a biopic. It does not have action scenes. It does not have big set pieces. It is a biopic, and yes, it's a blockbuster. Yes, it's Christopher Nolan, but the last really comparable would have to be either The Revenant or Gravity. I don't see this being the type of movie that gets not even just the win. I don't see this being the type of movie that gets the nomination. I just feel like they're going to go for something that's stronger in picture, aka Anora, The Brutalist, or Emilia Pérez.
This film, just like the first one, is going to rack up all these tech nominations. This film, just like the first one, is going to rack up that adapted screenplay nomination. And then, in a potential crazy world, this film could overperform the first film and get into SAG Ensemble. If it gets into SAG, the industry is supporting it more overall. Obviously, SAG is kind of a crazy call at this point, but going back to what we were just talking about, so many contenders in picture and ensemble are dropping like flies. They're going off the radar entirely. Here, we have a film that both the industry and the audiences have shown we support so far. It's just what will happen when we get into actual nomination and voting season.
I mean, guaranteed this will be at the top of my preferential ballot. I'm totally happy if it does end up really overperforming. But part of why I'm feeling a little apprehensive is that despite being a quote-unquote tech giant, this has no chance of being the nomination leader. It maxes at 10 nominations. Picture, director, screenplay, cinematography, editing, costumes, production design, makeup, sound, visual effects. That's 10 nominations. It's not getting more than that.
10 could be the leader this year. It really just depends on Emilia Pérez, because Brutalist is not going over 10. I don't think a lot of these other films are going over 10. I think it's Dune or Emilia.
But that said, its worst package, which I feel like it's closer to than getting director, would just be missing director, missing adapted screenplay. We've seen crazy shit happen in cinematography, like Top Gun missing, so maybe cinematography is not a lock, but everything else feels really strong. So its worst day is 8 nominations. Best day, 10. And I think that's a pretty good range. Also, to talk about taking wins when we have them, we've been telling y'all all year long, this is not going to be eligible for score.
I mean, Hans Zimmer has a lot of projects this year, so it makes sense that if Dune's out, he has other things to push to worry about, but I think this is a year where we get 0 Hans Zimmer nominations because all his scores besides Dune have been pretty mid.
I think we should move on to Conclave, our next one in our kind of collective lineups. Neither of us are really considering this too strongly for a Best Picture winner. How are you feeling about this one right now?
I rewatched Conclave, and I think I like it even more. I think not just because of the election happening the other day, and not just because of the box office, but when you pair all these other angles coming together with the downward trajectory of Sing Sing, the reason why I have Conclave so high is it's my new adapted screenplay winner. Like you had said before, your Best Picture winner is either winning director, original, or adapted. So usually in my predictions, my top 4 are usually including all of those things. So Conclave being in my top 4 is the implication of adapted. And I could see this film really surging here going forward. The old heads are showing up for it at the box office. It's making money, at least for a film of this type of Academy buzz. Box office doesn't matter. I've said this numerous times for non-blockbuster films, but when a film like this can make some money, it's a good show for it being more accessible down the line.
To me, this feels like the type of movie that everyone likes, but it doesn't have immense passion. I have it in my top 4 because I have it winning adapted screenplay, because I don't see anything else in that category having a ton of passion unless we see Sing Sing get completely reignited and gets like a new lease on life that it did not have in its initial release. But right now, Conclave is just the most widely appealing film in that lineup, in that category. On its best day, it has a huge nomination package. I could see 12 nominations for this, being picture, director, actor, supporting actor for Stanley Tucci, supporting actress for Isabella Rossellini, adapted screenplay, cinematography, editing, score, costume, production design, sound. That's a lot of nominations. But on its worst day, this is only locked for picture, actor, adapted screenplay, and score. It feels to me like an Irishman or a Killers of the Flower Moon type contender, where it's the type of movie that could be nominated everywhere, but it's not a lock in most places. It's that number 4 to 7 spot. It's in that range of being nomination competitive, but in no way is it a lock. Even with an adapted screenplay win, I don't feel that this is win competitive on a preferential ballot, because it's going to get a lot of 4s and 5s and not a lot of 1s.
I can see Conclave being a consistent 3 type 4 movie on a lot of these ballots, something like Coda. At least for me, if Conclave were going to show signs of life to be in a potential upset competitor, actor could come along. All year long, I've been kind of denying Ralph Fiennes his Lifetime Oscar just because the role didn't really seem winning. And after seeing the film twice now, I still hold that. But I mean, if Brutalist is too cold, if A Complete Unknown does flop, I could see Fiennes collecting some of these precursors to make it a little bit of a competition. Like you said, it could be an Irishman, Killers of the Flower Moon type nomination where it just sneaks its way into these categories. Focus, they know what they're doing for the most part. They rarely miss nominations that they're expected to get. So I think, like you said, 4 is its base. I would potentially probably go 5 or 6 currently. I would throw in director, especially if there's someone out there who thinks Denis not getting in. I think Berger is the easy swap for him into director. Depending on how you feel about films like Nosferatu or Gladiator II, if you think both of those are kind of fake or going to underperform a little bit, I think that there's room for costumes or production design to kind of slide Conclave in for recreating the Vatican, because obviously they didn't go inside the real Vatican, and it's contemporary costumes, but these aren't costumes you see every day in the street. These are very old setting costumes just worn in the modern day. Well, you talk about divisive, and I know a lot of people are back and forth if this film is actually divisive, but The Brutalist, I would say this film's divisive. I mean, I've only seen it once now, but the screen I saw it at had people calling it one of the best films they've ever seen, and people saying it's one of the worst films they've ever seen.
Really? I've heard people call it mid. I've not heard anyone say one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Maybe it was just the people I was sitting around. But here for Brutalist, after seeing it now, I understand the monumental proclaims and how this film is a flashback to the golden age of creating cinema. But I also see the other side of stuff where people say it's way too long, it's overly self-indulgent, it loses steam in the second half, and I could see it kind of playing like that in the case of award season. It was the bright, shiny new thing on its premiere at Venice, but then it doesn't have a very strong presence throughout most of festival season because most festivals, most screenings can't do 35 or 70 millimeter. At least A24's rollout currently has this focusing on that type of release and then eventually going to digital. You look at the bright side, if Brutalist is the film that Hollywood wants to return to, they want to acclaim stuff because they want more films to be made like it. Picture, director, Brody, Pierce, Felicity Jones, original screenplay, cinematography, editing, score, costumes, production design, sound. There's so many things you could kind of throw in here. 12, 13, 14 potential max nominations. But you could look on the flip side and you could see this sink to maybe just picture, director, Brody, Pierce, original cinematography, score, and production design. So a floor of 8, a ceiling of like 13, 14. If this film is the true next best picture, yeah, it's going to lead to nominations. But if it's getting like 9, 8, maybe even seeking to 7, then that's showing, hey, this film, it's like Killers of the Flower Moon. People respect it more than they love it. That's
the thing that we hear every year, right? There's always a movie that people are like, oh, that movie was so well done, but I liked this other movie more. It's the yearly Power of the Dog. It's the Roma. It's the movie that's going to have immense critical passion, but it might be too cold to win at the end of the day. And I say that as I love this movie. I have it like neck and neck with Anora on my top movies of the year list. I think this is fantastic. I will defend the second half of this. I think it loses no steam. I find it's just a fantastic film all the way through. It has passion, but will it have broad support?
Things can change if this has a strike of support and a strike of re-energizing, kind of like what we saw for the Zone of Interest last year, because there was a giant portion of the season where a lot of people were low on that film, saying, oh, it's just going to be international feature. Maybe it can be director, but I'm not seeing a picture. So I feel like Brutalist is going to have a resurgence later on down the year. It's just, is it going to be too late for a win potential? And it will just be maybe winning some of those categories like cinematography, like score, like production design, where it's enough to win those late, but it's not enough to win something major above the line later.
I feel like resurgence is the wrong word, because resurgence means it's going away for a bit. I don't think this is going to go away. I think this stays in that sort of top 5 position all year long, and the only question is going to be, can it pick up wins as well as it picks up nominations? I just struggled to see a general consensus that this is the best. I mean, even the people that I was around at TIFF, you know, when we got out of the movie, everyone, even the people who ended up rating it like 5 stars, they were like, man, I need to think of how I feel about that one. I hate to say this, the Academy, if they have to think about how they feel about something, they probably don't like it. Anyways, let's move on to Sing Sing. A24 flopped with this one so hard. The only question is, can they bring it back? You said resurgence for The Brutalist. I think resurgence is the word that I would use for Sing Sing. Can it have a resurgence? Can they regain the ground that they lost with their absolutely pathetic box office run?
At least to me, my whole reason for always still believing in Sing Sing was it had a very clear and empty path to win Best Adapted Screenplay. Obviously, we have Conclave now. Conclave is a major roadblock for that path. So what I need to see from A24 is currently what they are doing. They're getting this film out with the cast in front of actual voters. They aren't letting many normies see it, but they're getting sure that voters are seeing the film. Gothams saw the film. They're like, we love the acting. I know they have different voting bodies for every category, but at least the people who voted on acting liked it, but the people who voted in director, screenplay, and picture didn't seem to love it, at least in their top 5 of the year. Will that be an implication for the future? Because, as I said before, Gothams, they don't really matter, but they get the conversation rolling. And the conversation's rolling for Domingo. It's rolling for Clarence Macklin. But we can't start the conversation with Sing Sing as a picture nominee, as a screenplay nominee, as a potential director nominee. If stuff later in the year really hits, like if Nosferatu comes out and is a real contender, if one of these other films like Substance or A Real Pain or like Challengers gets the support it needs in screenplay and can pull a tech and can pull some sort of industry support, Sing Sing's kind of the easy move to push out, because A24 could just be like, well, we messed this one up, guys, but we'll give all of our faith to Brutalist.
Going back to what you were saying about them getting it in front of voters, that is a tactic that we often see with very artsy films. Think back to last year with The Zone of Interest and Nickel Boys, where they are pushing off when audiences can see that until the very last minute, because they're focusing instead on voters seeing it. And they don't want voters to hear general audiences being like, what the fuck is this weird art movie? They want voters to be untainted by that. But the difference with Sing Sing is audiences have had a chance to see it, and they decided not to. And a big part of voting for a movie to win Best Picture is that it has to fit the zeitgeist. And it's clear and evident that Sing Sing came out and the zeitgeist said, we don't give a shit. No matter how many screenings they do, no matter how much they bring the cast around, they're not in the zeitgeist. Unless, again, presuming A24 pulls off a miracle and suddenly the film gets a full-on second wind, and somehow suddenly everyone's talking about Clarence Macklin, everyone's talking about Coleman Domingo, everyone's talking about this movie. I think they've missed that chance. That should have happened when it was in theaters, and they failed with that. Why are voters going to go for this as a winner when it has come and gone unceremoniously the way that it did? But that said, I mean, it could be another movie. We talked about Conclave, we talked about Dune as this, a film that consistently ranks pretty high on people's preferential ballots, but doesn't get many number ones, but gets a lot of 3s, 4s, and 5s. That could be the recipe for Sing Sing to be a winner, but it just feels unlikely at this point.
I want to take a W. I want to be in the conversation here. Wicked. Longtime viewers here may remember our roundup video from last year's Film Ball, where I said, I think Wicked's in picture. All it needs to do is be good at the box office and not be shit. Got trash for that, and I listened to people because I thought it did look like shit. So I can't take a massive W. Yeah. Shout out to Troy on the channel if you're watching. You get the real W here. You stayed with us all year. You can't take W's if you don't actually stay with your opinion. So I get like a half W. You get a real W. Because Wicked, I'll let you talk about it. You've seen it. I haven't seen it. But I felt good about it all year long.
It was very reasonable for everyone to be cautious on this when they saw trailers. They do not look very good. The film, I mean, it's Wicked. Wicked, of course, is probably, outside of Hamilton, the biggest musical sensation of this century. It has been running on Broadway forever. It will keep running on Broadway. And you were right last year when you said all it needs to do is be not shit and make money at the box office. And it's going to make money at the box office, and it is certainly not shit. There are still problems carrying over from the trailer. It still doesn't look great, but that said, the design elements are really strong, which means that this has a tech package. It has a very, very strong case for costume design, for production design. It is likely going to get a visual effects nomination because there's so few visual effects driven films this year. Beyond that, it also is a musical, so sound is on the table. Makeup, of course, very much on the table because of Cynthia Erivo's being green. That said, not a lock because that's the only makeup that happens. And of course, when we talk about sound, we have to consider editing could come along too. And shocker, people love Ariana Grande. It does feel like it has everything it needs to get into Best Picture. Now, that said, I will refer back to the Color Purple debacle of last year, where Dylan, you and I both saw this before anyone else, and we both immediately went, oh, that's it. We just are both very biased towards musicals. I'm not going to take myself too seriously here and say it's a lock or anything, but if this makes a ton of money in the box office, which I think it will, I don't see why it would have to miss.
If this film is going to be a hit, I mean, there's signs saying this could reach almost 170 opening weekend. It could put up Barbie numbers at the box office. I'm not saying we have Barbenheimer Part 2, but at least I know personally, people like myself, because I'm doing this, are going to do the double feature of Gladiator and Wicked. I'm not saying it's going to be the same thing, because I don't think Gladiator is a real contender. I see it Thursday, so maybe my opinion changes then. But overall, I just feel like Wicked has the juice to do it. We talked about all year long, supporting actress, it's weak. And I said before, like, Grande has the stuff here. It's just like, will people take her serious? And at least the social media reactions so far seem like at least the people who have seen the film so far are taking her serious.
I will say, even a few weeks ago, you put Grande into your top 10, and I was like, fucking get real, dude. What are you talking about? My memory of Wicked was that Glinda is sort of like a nothing role, and I kept thinking of Ariana Grande as Don't Look Up. Despite the fact that I really like Ariana Grande, I think she's terrible in that movie. I knew her from Nickelodeon and from Don't Look Up as an actor. I love her music. I was surprised that she was my favorite performance, supporting performance of the year. Favorite supporting performance. From the first second she comes on screen, I was hooked. I didn't know she had this in her. And watching Ariana Grande in Wicked feels like you're seeing someone live out their childhood dreams. You can tell that she's rehearsed every scene in front of a mirror for the past 20 years. And there's something so rewarding about seeing someone live their dreams that way. She's phenomenal.
I guess the last thing just to say about Wicked overall is for that video that you referenced, I think I had Grande over like Rossellini and Felicity Jones at that point. So I guess there could have been some fair judgment there because I had her over people that at that time were basically shoo-in. But this next film that we're going to talk about real quick is one I've seen, you see tonight, I think is being greatly underestimated by a lot of people out there in this community at the moment, just because this thing seems like it should dominate the critic circuit. The reference Gothams, that's all we have so far. It did really well there. It hit every potential nomination it could have got at the Gothams. So that could be signs of what's to come for Nickel Boys. I feel like this is a film critics are going to ride hard all a season long in very specific categories. I don't think this has a very high ceiling, but I feel like the categories where it's in should be consistent at most places. So if you want to say it's very most top best ceiling that it could possibly get, I think it would be picture, director, adapted screenplay, cinematography, editing, sound. I know a lot of other people would say Ingenue Ellis Taylor. Personally, I see zero chance for that happening. Its worst package is no one cares about this movie, and it blanks. But I think even if no one cares about this movie, it's still getting at least one nomination for adapted screenplay.
I'm very curious to see it because, again, I still feel like being so artsy, it could end up getting left out everywhere. Even adapted screenplay. Cinematography feels like it should be a given, but we have seen in the past that the cinematography branch often doesn't love when something is really different, when something's really unique. I think back to Zone of Interest last year, and sure, the whole point of Zone of Interest is that it's not visually flashy, it's not really pleasing to look at, but it's also really creative, and the cinematography is very much a part of why that movie works. You could say that Nickel Boys looks like a Terrence Malick movie, and yes, it's doing something different, but at the same time, I could see a world where cinematographers look at the point of view angle that the movie is taking. They look at that style of filmmaking and they go, that's not how we do it. That's not cinematography. And they snub it. I could see this getting nominations and wins in cinematography everywhere and then still missing the Oscars. That branch does not seem to like when people are genuinely creative and breaking the norms. They would rather go for something like The Trial of the Chicago 7 or Empire of Light than something like Zone of Interest or Nickel Boys. In my opinion, that's what I see trending from that category. They don't go with stuff that they haven't seen before.
Last year we had Jonathan Glazer make director, miss cinematography, but I feel like this year for Nickel Boys, it's one of those low best picture contenders like Triangle of Sadness that sneaks their way into the best director race, where it's just like, hey, this film is here because of how bold and original it is, and I feel like if it gets in that way, yes, cinematography, it could miss like Zone of Interest last year, but at least to me, the visuals here are more stunning.
So let's move on to one of our last unknowns, a complete unknown, which to this point is truly a complete unknown. We don't know if this is Searchlight's big player or if it's a mid-flop, but oftentimes biopics can be mid, and they make picture anyways. So the big question here is this going to be Bohemian Rhapsody? Honestly, I see a possibility where this could be an across-the-board contender, getting nominations for picture, actor, both supporting categories. It could be in screenplay. It could be in cinematography. I just talked about that category loves, like, very plainly shot movies like this that have that sort of studio tinge to them. It could be in editing, makeup, sound. But the worst package for this could just be Timothée Chalamet. Could be no Chalamet at all.
If Chalamet comes, I think makeup probably comes too. They're doing the maestro nose here. That's what the Academy goes for, as long as the film is on their radar. So I think they kind of come as a package sort of thing here. But no, I do agree with everything else that you said here. This film is, just like the title says, a complete unknown. We know nothing about it. All we have is random test screenings that could be true, could be fake. Even if they're true, doesn't matter. The Academy eats this type of stuff up. And I'm not just saying it because it's a musical biopic about an iconic male music star, but like this could be Elvis, where it is just that film that despite everyone else's intentions, it survives and it gets all these nominations that a lot of people think it doesn't deserve, but probably wins none of them. Or it could be something like Judy, where it, despite missing Best Picture, the acting performance is strong enough to get in and could contend for some awards. I know Judy went on to win, but Chalamet would need the Best Picture nomination to win here. Because Searchlight clearly believes in it, but no one has seen it, so everything anyone says is just their own personal beliefs on a film that they've seen 2-3 minutes of footage of so far.
I don't know if we have enough information to even say that Searchlight believes in it, though.
I guess my reasoning for saying that is just the fact that they rushed this film to come this year. I understand we'll see here in about a month. Was that just for box office prospects? They thought this film would make money. But again, musical biopics don't need to come out on Christmas to make money. They could drop this in February and make more than Bob Marley did last year. And Bob Marley made a good penny at the box office.
That's interesting because also, like, I don't think Bob Dylan is bigger than Bob Marley. Bob Dylan has always been someone that like resonates more with critics and like the indie weirdos than the popular crowd.
Well, that's why I agree that them rushing it to this year shows sign of faith for awards, because if you're not releasing the film now for award centric, then why rush the film so quick anyway? You could just release it next year, give it a whole year for post-production, clean the film up even more, potentially do more reshoots or whatever, and have a cleaner potentially better looking film to give people for next season's awards race. But I guess the caveat to that is you have Michael next year.
Outside of Bob Marley, there's no big musical biopic this year, so they could have just seen an opening to put one into this season where, you know, maybe a Bob Dylan biopic looks more appealing when you don't have Michael Jackson around.
It's a film that I am becoming a little bit less bullish on as we get closer, just because we have other films succeeding when we still know nothing about that movie, because I know they're completely different, but they both center around music with the presence of Wicked and Emilia Pérez, which we already had. Can we have room for 3? I know they're 3 very different musicals, a Broadway adaptation, a musical biopic, and an original musical, but still 10 films, 3 of them are centric on music. Is that something that the Academy wants to go for or will go for? That's really the question. And I guess that is our consensus between us two right now.
Those are all the ones that we both have in our top 10. But we've got 2 movies that one of us has in, one of us has out.
So number 10, I guess, on our average rating of all these is a film I just got to see. And I think the funniest thing this award season could have is where I was so high on Room Next Door without seeing it. You were so high on Saturday Night without seeing it. And both these films flop entirely at the Oscars and get 0 nominations. So our whole big debacle we had for like a month and a half was pointless at the end of the day, because Room Next Door is a film that has, I think, a pretty high ceiling or an abysmal floor. We've seen so far at Venice, we just saw at the EFAs, there is an audience that really likes this movie. And if the audience really likes this movie, it could potentially get into picture, could get into director with Pedro Almodovar, could get into actress, adapted screenplay, maybe even editing and score. That's its very, very best case scenario at 6 nominations. If you can't connect with it, you're not going to rock with it. But if you're on the same wavelength, you're going to really like that. And at least to me, that's what seemed like the vibe was around everyone around me. I saw a handful of people give this a love on the rating scale. And I heard a handful of people saying, like, what did I just watch? Was that supposed to be funny? And I think that could carry over into award season where people are mixed on it. But I think what we've seen so far is that European bodies are supporting this film. I think once we get to some more domestic bodies, it will struggle a little bit. Golden Globes is a European body, so I think Golden Globes will go out for this, while something like SAG, something like CCA may just blanket entirely.
You're right. Golden Globes is where we need to see this hit in order for it to have a path to a Best Picture nomination. Likewise, if it's not hitting big at BAFTA, it is very likely not as strong as we think. It did everything it needs to at the European Film Awards. The question is, can it continue that with the more award season-centric bodies? The last one I have in my top 10, you have quite a bit lower, and that's because you've seen this and I have not. Something, again, I will say, I'll take my win. I have been saying probably since March that Blitz is not a thing. I was the earliest non-believer. I remember we posted our first Best Picture video or whatever on Reddit, and we had people in the comments being like, this is the first time I've ever seen someone not be confident in Blitz. I've been saying it all year long, and yet now I have it at my number 10 slot when everyone else is going, this movie's mid. But here's the thing, from the outside, again, haven't seen it, it feels like the type of mid movie that does get nominated, because it feels like something that will have those mid reviews, no passion. It's got that like mid 70s Metacritic, which shows that people still give it good ratings even if they're not loving it. But it targets older voters. It targets British voters. It has some tech support behind it, which means that people can really ride with it. It just reminds me of so many films that have happened in the past. What I've kept going back to is Nightmare Alley. A film that premiered, had no passion around it, and then it still got nominated and got a couple of techs because it just hit the right people. It was good enough.
To me, Blitz is not good enough, but I'm going to try to keep my bias on this film outside of predictions here, because I think that Blitz's strengths are in categories that are pretty weak overall. Saoirse Ronan for supporting actress. She's an easy slot in there if you want some above-the-line support for this film. Then you go into some tech categories. You have costumes, which I think is the strongest tech element for this film in terms of a nomination. That category, while it may be very top-heavy, there's an open 5th and there's an open 4th slot. Then you can go to some other things like production design or sound, where maybe it's a little stronger competition, where the people who worked on those elements inside this film are pretty renowned, so maybe they can get in for kind of a legacy type nomination. And Blitz is just one for me. I haven't seen anyone adore this movie as you're talking about. It seems like people are holding, I'm not saying you, but for some other people who have seen it, are kind of holding it more so because it's McQueen, it's Apple. They're just going to get it in there. While for me, I think the reason why Nightmare Alley succeeded at the end of the day is number 11, number 12. Kind of like last year, like what were they? Was it like The Lost Daughter? Was it Tick Tick Boom? Nightmare Alley, at least to me, had more elements supporting that film than those other ones had, because the other ones just had above the line support, while Nightmare Alley had support below the line and was from an acclaimed director, which Blitz could get in this year. The main reason why I had Blitz so low is I feel like there's a lot of other films fighting for the same type of nominations that just seem stronger. We have Wicked now in the race. Gladiator 2, while it's not a Best Picture contender, is going to get a lot of these nominations, eating away at Blitz's chances there. Call me crazy too, I still think Nosferatu is going to at least be a tech player. So that's 3 films right there I feel like are stronger.
Well, that's, I guess, the reason I have it at number 10 is I don't think a lot of those movies are stronger than Blitz. I'm not seeing Nosferatu as stronger. I'm seeing a path for Gladiator to be stronger, but I also don't think people will take it as seriously as some people will take Blitz. We can't underestimate the British crowd. This could perform exceptionally well at BAFTA. There's still a possibility of that. Of course, if it doesn't, dominate the shortlists at BAFTA, then it's nothing. At this point, I just feel like in a year that feels this shallow in terms of contenders, I don't see a reason to doubt Blitz, at least until I see it, which I don't know when that'll be, hopefully very soon. Maybe I'll change my tune when I see it, and I just won't see a path for it anymore.
Well, speaking of changing your tune, I could change my tune within like 24 hours of this video, because Gladiator 2 is the next one we're talking about. Matt got to see Wicked, I get to see Gladiator 2 early, so we'll kind of have both sides of the die, just not both together. This film, I think, I've been saying this all year long, is Wakanda Forever. It's tech elements, it's a supporting nomination, but Best Picture was never really in the cards for it. There's other sequels that are doing the same thing, but probably better. So I don't think Wicked and Gladiator can coexist, and I think Wicked would be stronger than Gladiator 2 at this moment.
Wicked is going to make more money. It's going to have longer legs. It's going to be making money all the way until February. Families are going to see it over the holidays. It's going to have great Thanksgiving box office. It's that type of movie. Gladiator 2 is going to make less. It's likely going to be less highly rated by critics. And yes, some people might say that Gladiator 2 is going to be seen as the more serious film between it and Wicked. I also feel like that's kind of rooted in like the McDonald's Happy Meal style of thinking, where people look at Wicked and go, oh, that's for girls. Can't be serious. I need to see tigers eating muscled men in barely any clothes. That's a serious movie. I know that part of the reason people view Gladiator as being serious, as being more than just an action blockbuster, is because the first one won Best Picture. That can't be denied, but I do feel like when those two movies are put up against each other, when Wicked and Gladiator 2 are put up against each other, Wicked is going to outperform in basically every single measurable facet. Gladiator 2 feels like at best it's Wakanda Forever. I guess a big question for me is, if it is Wakanda Forever, would Wakanda Forever make it in a year that feels as shallow, as weak as this one? And it's possible that it could.
I think a lot of people would say 2022 was a little shallow and weak, considering that there was all this conversation. Is it The Whale? Is it Babylon? Is it Wakanda Forever? Is it Women Talking? And Women Talking is the one that edged in there for that 10th slot.
Triangle of Sadness also, I would say, was an uncertain thing.
That is completely true, because I don't think I had that in there at the end of the day. But yeah, Gladiator 2 is just like going back to what you said about the For Boys for Girls. The people saying it's more of a series of an awards contender. I mean, what is saying Wicked's not a serious awards contender other than I don't like it because it's a musical? It has the technical craft work, the same type of stuff that you say Gladiator has. They're the same film, just two completely different sides of being the same film.
McDonald's Happy Meal. People just want to take the boys' toy more seriously. But the reality is Wicked is just going to be bigger. They could, I guess, Barbenheimer their way in, but I feel like it's a very silly thing to predict that would happen just because it happened last year.
I think it's too late to Barbenheimer. Like, Barbenheimer had months to dominate the conversation, even before release. Wicked and Gladiator are coming out after some nomination bodies have already voted, and obviously they've already seen the films, but like the social media hasn't happened yet. But you talked about Reddit and how some people sometimes don't like our opinions, and this next movie literally, and every time someone posts our video, which shout out to Josen One, he always posts our videos, so shout out to you. But A Real Pain always comes up about how we don't believe in this film, and everyone's like, but A Real Pain's real, it's in picture, it's in screenplay, Culkin could win supporting actor, but we have never believed in this.
I briefly had it in my top 10. I've taken it out again because I'm getting such serious May-December vibes. That's not me trying to make a direct comparison between the films. I know that A Real Pain is much more accessible. May-December is tailored to be inaccessible, while A Real Pain is very much meant to be populist. What I mean when I compare the films is that both of them released and had like this real surge of popularity where I feel like a lot of people weren't talking about A Real Pain, and then it came to like mid-October to early November and people were really hyping it, and it just feels so much to me like that same surge that happened last year, which ultimately that was a fake thing that did not manifest into anything. This has low nomination potential, literally maxes out at picture, screenplay, and Culkin. And on its worst day, I would say no matter what, it gets a screenplay nomination. But I really think that Culkin could be the Charles Melton surprise shocker he's missing on nomination morning. I think a lot of his campaign is being boosted by people who are Succession fans, who just desperately want the actors that they love from TV to be awards winners.
I know some people think there is an avenue for Eisenberg to get into lead actor because there's an empty five, because people will deny Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice until the world ends. People hate John David Washington even though they haven't seen The Piano Lesson, and after that it's like Paul Mescal. So like I get why you're throwing Eisenberg. I just wouldn't put Eisenberg above Stan or Washington until at least we get some nominations. That's going to dive us into the next film, which we've mentioned a little bit already. It's kind of like a complete unknown. We have no knowledge of this film because no one has seen this film, at least that can talk about it so far, and that's Nosferatu. The big thing drawing here is, can it be a tech contender? And if it is, how many technical nominations can they get? It could find its way into like production design, costumes, cinematography, sound. Apparently the score is really good. On the flip side, it's a horror film. It's coming out on Christmas. Its focus features number 2 dog. So there's 2 avenues this film can go. I'm currently on this is a tech contender, but it's missing picture slightly, as we kind of see every year. And I mean, like, you can hate on Napoleon all you want. Napoleon was at least number 14 in Best Picture last year with its 3 technical nominations. And I mean, if Nosferatu is getting 3 or 4, it's still up there in the realm of the Best Picture contenders.
I'm still very wary about all of this. I feel like everyone, and we'll talk about this in a moment with the substance, I feel like everyone just wants to ride on horror movies as like a what if this happens? And it rarely ever does. So I want to ask you, because I think the mark for me is 85 Metacritic and like $250 million. I'm just pulling that number out of my ass.
Yeah.
But what Metacritic score and box office number do we need to see for this to be a really strong contender?
Even more so than the box office and the Metacritic is, what type of film is this? Is this just a straight horror film? Or is Eggers pulling something that we talked about earlier in this year? Is he pulling a Barbification of Nosferatu, and it's taking this iconic character but putting a new spin to the story, making some sort of social message with it, as well as just making this his own world, his own character, unlike anything we've seen before? If he's doing that, then it's in the conversation, regardless if it makes money or Metacritic. But then if it's not doing that and it still gets the Metacritic scores, I don't think it's in the picture conversation. So if it's doing that plus the Metacritic, I think, like you said, the 80 to 85 range. Box office, I would need to see it. 250 would be one of the highest horror films of this decade.
I don't know anything about box office. That was a number I pulled completely out of my ass again.
But I mean, that's kind of what it probably would need to get into the zeitgeist strongly enough to overcome the horror bias. And
well, what did Get Out have? It's the only horror movie that's been nominated in like a couple decades.
It had 255 million worldwide.
Wow. So that actually, I would say we would need to see Get Out level box office.
Which I don't know how possible that would be to reach for this film. We've seen Robert Eggers' films before. They're all going to be beautiful. They're going to be very well put together. They're going to have support for the most part from critics. It's just, what is this one doing differently? Because like he did The Northman, but he did The Northman the way you think Robert Eggers would do The Northman. He had The Lighthouse, which sure got his cinematography, but like it missed out Defoe, even if it got a few precursors. And then clearly The Witch was never really an Oscar thing to begin with. So like he has the acclaim, but like he needs to do something different in tandem with a big showcase premiere, and Focus elected not to send this to any festival. Maybe it's because the movie wasn't done yet. There's a lot of reasons why it hasn't been at any festivals yet, but that's the main thing I need to see. So without a real festival, not even going to AFI, it's just going straight to theaters. I'm sure critics will see it like a week or two early. I just think it's going to be too little too late for big prizes, but I still think text can kind of happen.
I can't predict a horror movie without thinking that it's going to be like a cultural sensation, which is also why I have no idea what the hell people are talking about with The Substance right now. I love The Substance. Don't take this as me knocking it. It is not just a horror movie. It is like one of the most disgusting, depraved, most demented fucking horror movies that has come out ever. The problem with seeing The Substance as a big Oscar contender, I think even makeup is a stretch. People who watch this in the demographic of the Academy are going to turn it off the second that Demi Moore falls to the floor in that bathroom and her spine splits open. They'll be gone. They'll say, no thank you. That's it. That's enough for me. I'm out.
On top of what you just said about the Academy demographic, sure, we've had films recently that showcase the Academy is willing to be new and be different. Poor Things, So Much Sex, Everything Ever All at Once, wacky film winning Best Picture, but like we've never seen something like The Substance before. And even if The Substance was the critical best film of the year, let's say it had made a lot more money at the box office, because while I think this film has done great for the type of film it is at the box office, people are acting like this is one of the biggest hits of the year. Sure, if we are going to entertain this, what is going to happen? Forgetting director? I mean, EFA just didn't do it, and if they didn't do it, who's really going to do that going forward?
BAFTA's not going to do it.
Then you go to Demi Moore and lead actress. Sure, she'll show up, but she's showing up in places that either category split based off of a type of film, or they just have so many nominations, 6, 10 in a category. When we get to places that have a hard 5, I find it hard for her to be into those nominations. But then like you go to other categories, honestly, more so than makeup, screenplay is The Substance's best chance. I know everyone was like flipping out at Cannes, being like, how did this film win screenplay? It's such a directorial achievement. It's the novel idea. It's so different. It's so original. And yes, there's crazy things in there that you may not like, that people may be repelled by, but that's the easiest path, especially in original. We've seen Saturday Night Drop. We've seen Blitz. At least to me, even if Blitz isn't Best Picture, it's like Elvis. It's not getting a screenplay nomination. All the other contenders are just not really catching on, and I could see a world where Substance is the solo screenplay movie. Obviously, makeup would be such a cool win, but I find it hard for that to make the shortlist. I think if it makes the shortlist, sure, let's re-entertain it then, like we did for Godzilla -1 with visual effects. Once that made the shortlist, cool, we can entertain it. But until that happens, we can't really do that because you're predicting something that's not most likely going to happen.
The crux of the Oscar expert brothers, their argument is that because it won a prize at Cannes, that shows that people are willing to take it seriously, and that gives it a bit of clout to be taken seriously. But the thing that I struggle with is imagining someone seeing, oh, this is the Cannes Screenplay Prize winner. I should just throw this on. I'll see what this is. And then being absolutely fucking revolted by it. No matter how much people say, oh my God, it's a sensation. I don't know if it is outside of I mean, to talk about the next movie we're going to talk about, Challengers is another one where everyone on film Twitter was talking about it, but that didn't perform that well in like the real world box office. Because film Twitter is this bubble, they talk about the films that they love, it becomes very easy to believe that everyone is aware of and everyone's on the same page about these movies. But Challengers and The Substance are both movies that exist in a bubble. Even the people that do watch this and aren't grossed out by it, there's a divisiveness to The Substance. Some people just truly and genuinely believe that this is a genuinely misogynistic and hateful film. There's a very strong contingent out there. It started at Cannes, where people were just saying that this was like misogynistic male gaze garbage. That's not going to go away either.
What I think The Substance really comes down to is what bodies go out to support it and what don't. Because obviously, we should expect CCA to like this. We should expect Golden Globes because it's in the comedy musical category to go for it. Like if BAFTA goes for it, if SAG that goes for it. If like the trifecta is going to go for it in a major prize, sure, let's entertain it then. It's just not a prediction I can really hop on. But speaking of predictions that I know other people don't like to hop on, I've had challengers in score for so long, and I've had it in for screenplay. That's our next film up here. And this is a film I think, like Substance, that is very much being boosted, and it really will take the industry and the guilds and the critics to show, is this real? Or is this just what we want to happen? So far, obviously, all we've had is Gotham's. Gotham's showed both these movies one single nomination, so take that for what you will. Challengers, I think, has about the same path as Substance to Picture. Their avenues is through screenplay and a tech category. It's just which one is stronger for screenplay and which one is stronger in their tech. Obviously, they both have a cool outside angle to win their category, but winning their category would be the weirdest, coolest thing their branches have maybe ever done in their entirety. And their trips to screenplay, I don't think they can coexist. I think original screenplay will have one cool film that's probably not in Best Picture in their lineup. I would personally lean more towards Challengers.
Well, Challengers is not going to revolt everyone. That's a big thing in its favor when we're talking about the Academy. Challengers and The Substance do have the exact same path through the exact same awards. It's a given they're both going to do very well at the Critics' Choice. The question is, how well are they going to do? If we really see overperformance beyond what we expected at the Critics' Choice Awards for Challengers and The Substance, that's a good sign for other awards. If they underperform from what we expect, that is a bad sign. Right now, I don't see The Substance or Challengers being a thing. I think they are film Twitter bubble things. I think both of them will do fine at the Critics' Choice, but they're going to underperform. They're not going to be everywhere. I think back to RRR. The Critics' Choice put it into a few really key categories, but it didn't get in everywhere. Anyways, moving away from film Twitter to what I would say is one of film Twitter's biggest hate boners of the year, The Apprentice, a film that both of us have been high on and then low on, and then high on again when everyone else was low on it, and we're still high on it. I mean, it might have flopped at the box office. It is doing really well on video on demand, though.
It's that film that who expects it to do much at the box office because it's coming from Briarcliff. Their budget for marketing was nothing. Like, they had a few posters up at places. The trailer barely played in cinemas. It didn't have any TV spots. Like, the word wasn't out there that the Trump movie was out. But now that it's on streaming, it's ease of access, like Matt has said, the views are getting up, and people talk all year long, oh, we're tired of Trump, we don't want to talk about him. We're going to have Trump talk for the next 4 years.
All year long, everyone's been saying, no one wants to hear about Trump, no one wants to talk about Trump. People are going to be so sick of this shit that, like, The Apprentice is not doing anything. Evidently, again, we don't want to get too deep into everything. We know people are upset, and we know that, you know, as Oscar pundits, this is not our place to talk about this. But he just won the popular vote. And you could say that a movie dissing him could be received very poorly in that environment. But, I mean, I would say that Hollywood is probably one of the most actively anti-Trump groups out there. And when they're presented with an option to be able to talk about him and feel like they're doing something important, there is a political path for this to get a nomination. People might be too afraid to do it in the same way that everyone was afraid to pick it up and it didn't get distribution for months. But there is a path for the Robert De Niro's out there, the Mark Ruffalo's. How many actors publicly endorsed Harris? That, to me, feels like people who would get behind a campaign for Sebastian Stan, for Jeremy Strong, potentially even for pictures. So I don't want to talk about this one too much because now is not the time. You know, we're not trying to be here the day after the election being like, oh, guess this means the Apprentice is happening now. Even though that is exactly what I just did. But, like,
well, the difference here is that if people have watched our videos in the past, you've been high on The Apprentice since January. I've been pretty high on it since about June, July. It's not that we're changing our tune after this news. This news is just potentially adding to what we've already seen for the film going on. And I mean, you mentioned Mark Ruffalo. He's friends with Sebastian Stan. They've worked in films together. I can already see the FYC event now. Mark Ruffalo, a discussion with Ruffalo, Stan, Strong, and Ali Abbasi. Boom. You have the event there. The other thing, The Apprentice, I think this film plays pretty well to people on both sides. Like, obviously, if you're going in wanting to hate it, you're probably going to hate it. But if you go in not with any expectations or judgments or whatever. I think that you can have a fun, enjoyable time with the movie overall. It's very well acted. It has a unique sense of style to it, and the script is pretty witty at times. That's going to move us to another film that seems oddly, at least more so than The Apprentice, seems oddly political, even though the substance of the film, at least from those who have seen it, says the film's not political whatsoever, and that's September 5th. I saw the trailer for the first time the other day. I thought the trailer looked really good and really engaging. Obviously, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't talk about it, but it's coming from Paramount. I have no faith in them getting this film out. Like, this would have to be like the grassroots thing that we talk about every year, where like critics make it happen. Critics aren't doing this. Industry can make it happen. Maybe they could, but like, what's the package? Picture, screenplay,
supporting actor, maybe.
But I mean, like, the people who've seen the film say like the acting, there's no standout.
I've seen people talk about Peter Sarsgaard quite a bit with it, but I think you're right. Like, what is the package for this, and why are people voting for it? And you could make a very disingenuous argument for like, oh, it's the movie of the moment, but I just don't see that. I feel like this is just manufactured. This feels like the She Said of this year, which admittedly I fell for She Said. I'm not going to fall for this one.
Well, that's going to bring us to the last film that we'll talk about here. And I would say it's not really worth much time, but it's Clint Eastwood's Juror number 2. Apparently it's screened at AFI, and some people really, really love it. Some people are a little bit more mixed on it. But Warner, for whatever reason, whether it's beef that Zaslav or his board has with Clint Eastwood throwing away money for like his last 4 films or whatever it is, they don't want people to see this.
But Clint Eastwood hasn't been throwing away money for his last few films. Like, Clint Eastwood is known for being the guy that comes in on schedule, under budget every single time, and he makes money. But Warner Brothers is determined to bury it. It also has a really solid Metacritic score. People like this movie. So a question I've seen a lot is like, what if Warner Brothers decides to pivot? They're not. They're releasing it on Max in like 2 weeks.
They at least added an FYC page for it on their website, but besides that, Warner doesn't seem to care much about the film. And I know this prediction video has been very long at this point, so made this far. Shout out to you. Thank you so much. But we are going to dive into one other thing just for fun, because there's no award for this year, but next year's Oscars, they're adding Best Casting. What does that actually mean? We don't really know, and that's why we're going to give a little fun. What would be Best Casting if the award was this year?
My take on Best Casting is I think every year it's going to be like 4 out of 5 SAG Ensemble. Like, SAG Ensemble is the precursor that we should be looking at for it. And I feel like we're largely going to see movies that are win competitive in one or more acting categories be the ones that get in for Best Casting. Right now, I have my winner as Emilia Pérez. Not only is Zoe Saldana likely a winner for Best Supporting Actress, but the fact that they also have Selena Gomez in a role that hasn't been afforded to her before. She hasn't gotten a lot of serious roles, and here she is, Oscar nomination competitive. And then, of course, Carlos Sofia Gascon is a big part of that as well. Finding a trans actor who could really pull this role off. I think that would be my angle for a win in this category. Outside of that, I would go with Anora for its very, very strong ensemble that is also largely unknowns or people who have been kind of picked out of the art film scene around the world, like Yuri Borisov being a Russian actor who was in Compartment Number 6 a few years ago and is suddenly given this amazing role in an American movie where he really gets to show his stuff, or Mikey Madison being given a chance to really show that she is a generational performer. Then there'd be the more conventional stuff, like Conclave, I would see as a very conventional nominee here. They're all very well suited to their roles. Sing Sing would be a nominee because the casting of that is definitely a part of why people are talking about this movie. And for the last one, I feel like they'd go with Wicked. They would want to award how difficult it would be to cast something that would be, people have their image in their mind of what Wicked should be, and finding the right Glinda, the right Elphaba is a challenge, and they really did that. So that would be my lineup.
Casting is a very interesting one to me, because I know when they first announced this category with this whole deep dive about, oh, this is what the casting branch looks like, this is what the BAFTA casting does, and how much they often overlap, which it seemed like the winners sometimes showed up at SAG, but they didn't always show up at BAFTA. For the Oscars, I think it would kind of be like that, where it's a mix of BAFTA casting, where we very much know BAFTA casting to be very much in favor of unknowns, as well as promoting one outstanding lead performance in a commanding role. And that's why I have Anora as what I think would win the category, because I think it's very much in the line of something like Joker, where it's the one one outstanding lead performance that you have to really cling on to that is winning an acting award. But in addition, it also has, like you mentioned, a cast from around the world of mostly unknowns getting their time to shine. It's got a funny cast. My issue with this is I don't really know how Anora is going to do at SAG this year. I know that is kind of a crazy take to make online right now, but for me, even when they go with like non-huge ensembles, the ensembles at least have some really well-known people, and not that Mikey Madsen isn't a star, she's just not A-list. I'm interested to see how that film does at SAG, but I think for Oscars, if I do think that Anora is the Best Picture winner, I think we will see this correlate with picture, if not with a just major acting contender every year. And that's why I have Emilia Pérez at number 2. All the reasons you said, I'm not going to reiterate them here. Conclave, it's renowned actors from all over the world. You have big names like Ray Fiennes, Tucci, Lithgow, Rossellini, and you're also pulling in some pretty big international actors as well into this cast, and everyone fits in so perfectly, and you have to really cast well when you're doing like a thriller mystery type thing. Wicked, it's big. Everything you said, I think this is one that could show up at SAG. Even if it wasn't the Best Picture, I think this could show up at SAG. Currently at 5, I have Nickel Boys, casting kids. That's a very hard film to cast once you see it. I think that's a safe place to rock currently, but we want to hear what all of you out there have predicted for Best Picture. We just did a whole 2.5-hour video.
Yeah.
Shout out to Matt ahead of time for whatever he edits this down to.
We've had so much to talk about, right? We haven't talked since early October. So this has been very worthwhile, and I hope y'all out there got something out of this video, or are mad at us for some reason. I'm sure we've given you lots of reasons to be mad at us, but no matter what, thank you so much for watching. As always, my name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.